So for the second part of this course period here, you're going to be looking at Vishnu and Krishna in the Hindu epics. Now Vishnu, sometimes known as Mahavishnu, is the second god in the Hindu Trimurti. The Trimurti consists of three gods that are responsible for creation, upkeep, and destruction of the world. The other two gods are Brahma, which is creation, and Shiva, which is destruction. According to the Vaishnavist sect, a group or school that we will examine later, the highest form of Ishvar is with qualities or saguna and have certain forms, but it's actually a limitless God, a limitless, transcendent, unchanging, absolute Brahman and the primal Atman, the self of the universe. So this is the highest form of Vishnu, simultaneously Brahma, simultaneously everything, simultaneously the Atman. There are many both benevolent and fearsome depictions of Vishnu. So don't necessarily describe them as bad, quote, but fearsome. In the benevolent aspects, he is depicted as an omniscient sleeping being on the coils of the serpent Adishesha, who represents time, floating in the primeval ocean of milk, which is called Shira Sagara. And he's normally depicted with the wife Lakshmi. I'll show you a depiction soon. Now Vishnu, of course, is a being that has many representations. So whenever the world is threatened with evil, chaos, and destructive forces, Vishnu descends in the form of an avatar, an incarnation, to restore the cosmic order and protect Dharma. Dashvatara are the 10 primary avatars or incarnations of Vishnu. Out of the 10, Rama and Krishna are the most important. The concept of the avatar or incarnation within Hinduism is often associated with Vishnu, the preserver and sustainer aspect of this Trimurti. The avatars of Vishnus descend and protect the Dharma, uphold the Dharma, in times of contest. So these forms might have a number of different representations, but one of the important sort of assertions of the nature of Vishnu comes from the Bhagavad Gita, where Vishnu says, "Whenever righteousness wanes and unrighteousness increases, I send myself forth for the protection of good and the destruction of evil, and the establishment of righteousness. I come into being age after age." In Vedic literature, in particular later Vedic literature, you start to see representations of Vishnu. But also, Vishnu is particularly prominent in the Puranas and the Itihasa. The most well-known of these avatars, of course, is Krishna, most notably present in the Vishnu Purana, the Bhagavata Purana, and the Mahabharata, and also Rama. But Krishna in particular is venerated in Vaishnavism as the ultimate primeval transcendent source of all existence. In the Mahabharata, Vishnu as Narayana states to Narada that he will appear in the following 10 incarnations, appearing first in the form of the swan, Hamsa, a tortoise, Kurma, a fish, Matsya, or foremost of regenerate ones, I shall then display myself as a boar, Varaha, and then as a man-lion, Nrisingha, then as a dwarf, Vamana, then as Rama of Brigu's race, so the king Rama, then as Rama and the son Dasharatha, then as Krishna, the scion of the Svatwata group, and lastly Kalki. So this comes from a section of the Bhagavad Gita, or actually a section of a later book in the Mahabharata. But what is important for us to understand is that in some Purana texts, There are also up to 22 avatar of Vishnu, and this includes listing the Buddha as an avatar of Vishnu. So even after Buddhism gets going, Hinduism lays claim again back to Buddhism afterwards and says, actually, that was part of Hinduism all along. It's a very interesting sort of claim there. And of course, there's this very representative aspect of Vishnu that is portrayed in 1960s psychedelic culture as well. And Jimi Hendrix and the Jimi Hendrix Experience on the cover of their famous album Axis Bolt of Love portrays himself as Vishnu. And you can see the original representation here. Now, I mentioned in the Mahabharata that Krishna is synonymous with Narayana, and Arjuna is referred to as Nara. So these are two very important characters or gods, Krishna and Arjuna, with Krishna being an avatar of Vishnu synonymous with Narayana. The epic identifies them both in the plural, however, which is really interesting. They're Krishnas. So they are part of the incarnations of Vishnu, recalling their mystical identity as Narayana, so sort of joint. Narayana is also described in the Bhagavad Gita as having a universal form, Vishvarupa, which is beyond the ordinary limits of human perception and imagination. Narayana's eternal and supreme abode is beyond the material universe. It's called Vaikuntha, which is a realm of bliss and happiness called Parampada. This means a final or highest place for liberated souls, not ultimately liberated souls, but sort of liberated souls who are maybe experiencing a form of moksha, but not ultimate moksha. Here they enjoy bliss and happiness for eternity in the company of the Supreme Lord. Vaikuntha is situated beyond the material universe and hence cannot be perceived or measured as a material space. It's not a space, it's not a place, it's beyond the material universe. So this is very important for us to understand. In one section of the Hindu epics, you have a very important quote here from the Mahabharata of Vishnu saying, I am Narayana, I am the source of all things, the eternal, the unchangeable, I am the creator of all things, I am the destroyer of all, I am Vishnu, I am Brahma, I am Sankara, the chief of the gods, I am King Vaishravana, and I am Yama, the lord of the deceased spirits. I am Shiva, I am Soma, I am Kasyapa, the lord of the created things. And, O best of regenerate ones, I am he called Datri. And he also that is called Vidatri. I am the sacrifice of the embodied. Fire is my mouth, earth my feet, and the sun and moon are my eyes. The heaven is the crown of my head, and firmament and the cardinal points are my ears. The waters are my sweat. Space with the cardinal points is my body, and the air is my mind. So this is a very sort of trans-cosmic being that's being portrayed here in the epic. And, O Brahmana, whatever is obtained by men by the practice of truth, clarity, ascetic austerities, and peace and harmlessness towards all creatures, and such other handsome deeds is obtained because of my arrangements. Governed by my ordinance, men wander within my body, their senses overwhelmed by me, they move not according to their will, but as they are moved by me. Portrayals of Vishnu, notably in this sense, have multiple arms, sometimes up to 8 arms, such as this image from Angkor Wat in Cambodia, which has been dressed in Buddhist garbs as well. But typically portrayals of Vishnu have 4 arms, such as this image from India here. And notice the coloration as well, and that snake, that holy snake that was mentioned earlier. Because of the coloration of blue, you can often pick out Vishnu from artistic works, such as this depiction from Royal Palace in Thailand, and Vishnu's notable sort of color blue can be found in portrayals in Buddhist temples in Thailand occasionally as well. So I mentioned that portrayal of Vishnu with Lakshmi, where Brahma is coming out of this lotus that's on the lower left-hand side of the slide, lying on the snake that is time itself in the primordial ocean of milk. Some versions of the Purana texts, unlike the Vedic and Upanishadic literature, emphasize that Vishnu is supreme and the god under which all other gods depend. Vishnu, for example, is the source of the creator deity Brahma in this sense. And this is very important for the Vaishnavite sort of group or school of Hinduism. Vishnu's iconography is typically showing Brahma being born in a lotus emerging from the navel, who is then ascribed to creating all forms of the universe. And this is quite common. In some Vaishnava Puranas, Vishnu takes the form of Rudra, or commands Rudra to destroy the world. Thereafter, the entire universe then dissolves, and along with time itself, everything is reabsorbed back into Vishnu. Then the universe is created all over again, starting a new kalpa, or eon. For this, the Bhagavad Purana, or the Bhagavad Purana, employs the metaphor of Vishnu as a spider, and the universe as his web. Other texts offer alternate cosmogenic theories, such as one where the universe and time are absorbed into Shiva, which is more common in Shaivnavite traditions, and we'll see that later also. According to most sort of scholarly academic interpretations, Vishnu, who according to the Balakanda was incarnated as Rama, first came into prominence with the epics themselves right around the first millennia of before the Common Era through the first millennia of the Common Era. So a pretty big time swoop there, but we're pretty firm in that. That's a safe bet there. Also, in the epic of the Mahabharata, there is a version of the Ramayana known as the Ramopakyana, which is a version depicted as a narration of Yudhishthira. So it's a different version of the Ramayana, but we have an avatar of Vishnu that appears actually in the Mahabharata. Rama is the main character of this particular tale, portrayed as the 7th avatar of the god Vishnu, and he is the eldest and the favored son of Dasharatha and the king of Ayodhya and his chief queen Kausalya. So Kausalya is Rama's mother. He is portrayed as the epitome of virtue. Dasharatha is forced by Kaikeyi to command Rama to relinquish his right to the throne for 14 years and go into exile. Rama kills a demon Ravana during this period, who abducts his wife Sita, who is portrayed here on the right-hand side of the slide on the top, with Rama on the left. And you can see that in some portrayals of Rama and Sita, they're just portrayals of Vishnu and Lakshmi. They're very, very similar. But Sita is understood to be a sort of incarnation of the goddess Lakshmi. She is one of the tale's protagonists in both this Ramopakyana and the Ramayana texts. She was from the blood of the sages and is one of those individuals who sacrificed their lives to develop a powerful force to rid the earth of demons. So, which is very, very important. She also collects blood and sacrifice in a pot which is buried in the earth, so she is called the daughter of Mother Earth in this interpretation. She's adopted by King Janaka, and she is also Rama's beloved wife. Rama went to Mithila and got a chance to marry her by breaking a magical bow while trying to tie a knot to it in a competition organized by the king Janaka of Mithila. The competition, supposedly, was to find the most suitable husband for Sita, and many princes, of course, competed. Now, inasmuch as Sita is understood as a representation of Lakshmi, for us, it's important that she's sort of a consort of Rama as well, both human and part goddess. Now, before we open it up for discussion here, I want to focus on Krishna, who is a very prominent major deity in Hinduism. He's worshipped as the 8th avatar of Vishnu and is the supreme god of certain schools and groups in his own right. He is a god of compassion, tenderness, and love, and he is even portrayed as cute and quite mignon, as you might say, in some portrayals, such as the lower right-hand side of the slide. But he's a major revered deity in his own right. He's got his own birthday celebration, which according to the lunar solar Hindu calendar falls in late August or early September of the Gregorian calendar. He's also a central character in the Mahabharata, the Bhagavata Purana, and the Bhagavad Gita, and is mentioned in many Hindu philosophical and mythological texts. The Bhagavad Gita is often referred to as just the Gita, quite simply. So the phrase the Gita refers to this Bhagavad Gita. It's a 700-verse Hindu scripture that's actually part of the epic Mahabharata, and it's dated to its composition and final compilation in the 2nd century before the Common Era, through the 2nd century of the Common Era, that final iteration. Krishna's iconography reflects these legends and shows him in different stages of his life, such as an infant eating butter, a young boy playing a flute, perhaps the most common, a young boy with Radha or surrounded by women devotees, or a friendly charioteer giving counsel to Arjuna up in the top right here, even in battle. The earliest text containing detailed depictions and descriptions of Krishna and his personality is definitely the Mahabharata, however. Krishna is central to many of the main stories of this epic. The 18 chapters of the 6th book, the Bhishma Parava, of the epic constitute the Bhagavad Gita and contain the advice of Krishna to Arjuna on the battlefield. The Harivamsa, which is a later appendix or appendage added on to the Mahabharata, contains a detailed version of Krishna's childhood and his youth. According to the Mahabharata, Krishna becomes Arjuna's charioteer for the Kurukshetra war, but on one condition, that he personally will not raise any weapon. Upon arrival in a battlefield and seeing that the enemies are his family, his grandfather, and his cousins, and his loved ones, Arjuna is actually moved, and he says his heart will not allow him to fight and kill others. He would rather renounce the kingdom and put down his Gandiv, Arjuna's bow, and carry on in another life. Krishna then advises him about the nature of life, ethics, and morality when one is faced with war, and a war between good and evil at that. He also gives advice on the impermanence of matter, the permanence of the Atman, and the nature of good, duties, responsibilities, the nature of true peace, and different types of yoga to practice, even very practical advice. But different types of yoga to practice in order to reach this state of bliss and the inner liberation that is moksha. This conversation between Krishna and Arjuna is presented as a discourse which makes up the main content of the Bhagavad Gita. For your discussion here, we're just going to have 3 separate threads. So you've got the questions for the first thread up top on the concept of avatar, the second thread on Vishnu and Krishna in the middle there, and then the third thread, just key Sanskrit language concepts that you associate with these discussions and why.